My parents gave my golden brother a Tesla and tried to blame me when he wrecked it. So I took one step that completely flipped their perfect story upside down. This isn't just a story about growing up in my brother's shadow, constantly overlooked while he had the world handed to him. This is about the night my family tried to pin an $80,000 mistake on me, and how that betrayal finally pushed me to expose the truth, no matter the cost. My name is Ethan, and for 27 years, I've felt like a background character in my own family's story. We grew up in Brooklyn, a really affluent suburb outside Boston, the kind of place where every house looks perfect and family vacations are always exotic. From the outside, we were the quintessential American dream. My dad, Robert, built a hugely successful commercial real estate company, and my mom, Diana, ran a high-end interior design firm. We had everything money could buy. But inside that beautiful colonial home, there was always an unspoken rule, two sets of standards, one for me and a totally different one for my younger brother, Brandon. As early as I can remember, it was like that. When I turned 15, my parents told me if I wanted spending money, I needed to get a job. So I spent my sophomore year bagging groceries, saving every single penny. Brandon, he got a generous weekly allowance that blew my bi-weekly paycheck out of the water, no strings attached. Then came the car situation. At 16, I asked my parents for help buying one. My dad, without even looking up from his newspaper, just said, "Son, nothing teaches responsibility like earning something yourself." I actually took that to heart. I worked extra shifts for a year and a half, busted my butt, and eventually saved enough to buy a 10-year-old Honda Civic with 120,000 miles on it. Driving that car home was one of the proudest moments of my life. Fast forward 3 years. Brandon turned 16. Our parents surprise him with a brand new Audi, a 4. His first car to learn responsibility, they called it. When I dared to point out how unfair it seemed, my mom just patted my shoulder and said, "Your brother needs more encouragement. Ethan, you've always been so self-sufficient." It was a pattern that repeated endlessly. I got into Boston University with a 3.9 GPA, played varsity basketball, and worked part-time. My parents congratulated me, then explained they'd only cover half my tuition. The rest was on me, loans and scholarships. I accepted it. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore while juggling a full course load. Brandon, he barely scraped by with a 2.5 GPA, partied every weekend, and had 0 extracurriculars. Yet, when he got into Northeastern, probably thanks to a hefty donation from my dad, they threw him a lavish party and promised to cover everything, including a furnished apartment downtown, so he wouldn't have to deal with the stress of dorm life. Predictably, Brandon dropped out after 3 semesters, claiming the program wasn't the right fit. My parents immediately supported his decision, funding an expensive film production program in LA. 6 months later, he was back, declaring filmmaking wasn't his passion. The next year, it was a business program. Same story. Meanwhile, I finished my computer science degree, paid off my student loans, and landed a good job at a software company. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, drove my reliable Toyota Corolla, and built my career from the ground up. I'd learned early on that comparing myself to Brandon was a path to pure resentment, so I tried to focus on my own journey and maintain a cordial family relationship. Every Sunday, my mom insisted on family dinner. These dinners were honestly an exercise in emotional restraint for me. The conversation always revolved around Brandon, his latest interest, my parents' attempts to help him find his path, my accomplishments at work. "Hey, quick, that's nice, dear," before they pivoted back to Brandon. My best friend, Marcus, who'd seen this dynamic play out since we were kids, often asked why I even bothered. "You're a glutton for punishment," he'd say. But still, they were my family, and a part of me, a deep-seated part, still craved their approval. My girlfriend, Kayla, who I'd been dating for 2 years, was less patient. After a few dinners, she finally just said it. "They don't even realize they're doing it, Ethan. They constantly undermine your achievements while praising Brandon for the smallest efforts. It's so ingrained in how they see both of you." I knew she was right, but I thought I'd made peace with it. Or so I thought. Last spring, my parents invited the entire extended family over for a special announcement. My Uncle James, my dad's brother, was the only one who seemed to actually see the imbalance. He gave me a sympathetic look as my parents clinked their glasses. "We have wonderful news," my mother beamed. "Brandon has decided to pursue entrepreneurship. We're thrilled to announce we're backing his new venture in sustainable fashion." The room erupted. My dad added, "He'll be launching his own clothing line. We've set him up with all the resources he needs to succeed." I just sat there, quiet. 6 months earlier, I'd approached them about helping me with a down payment on a condo. They declined, saying a mortgage would be too stressful for me right now. Uncle James leaned over, whispering, "Let me guess, they're investing in this venture the same way they invested in his DJ equipment last year." I nodded, remembering the $5,000 worth of professional gear now gathering dust in their basement after Brandon's 3-week interest in becoming a music producer. As everyone fawned over Brandon, listening to his vague business plan, I stepped outside. It wasn't jealousy. I'd built a life I was proud of. What truly bothered me was the constant, deafening message that Brandon was somehow more deserving of support and second chances than I was. Little did I know, this announcement was just the tip of the iceberg, a prelude to an even more egregious display of favoritism that would finally, irrevocably, push me to my breaking point. It was a warm Friday evening in June when my parents invited Brandon and me to Morton's Steakhouse, my dad's favorite for important occasions. I figured it was another celebration of Brandon's clothing line. I wasn't thrilled, but I showed up, dressed as requested. My parents and Brandon were already there, champagne flutes in front of them. My mom waved enthusiastically. "Ethan, there you are. We've already ordered your favorite appetizers." My dad shook my hand. "Always so formal with me." "Good to see you, son. Take a seat. We have exciting news." Brandon sat across from me, practically vibrating with excitement, a smug smile playing on his lips. I braced myself. After we ordered and the champagne was refilled, my dad cleared his throat, pulling a small box from his jacket. He slid it across the table to Brandon. "Your mother and I are so proud of your new business venture. We know that image is everything in the fashion industry, and an entrepreneur needs to make the right impression. So, we decided you need the right vehicle to reflect your brand's values." Brandon opened the box with agonizing slowness, even though he clearly already knew what was inside. He pulled out a key fob with the unmistakable Tesla logo and let out a whoop that turned heads across the restaurant. "No way. You got me a Tesla." "Which model?" he practically shouted. My mom beamed. "A Model S, of course. The plaid version. We know how important sustainability is to your brand, and we wanted to support your vision." I nearly choked on my champagne. The Tesla Model S Plaid starts at around $130,000. This wasn't just a car. It was a luxury vehicle that cost more than most people in America make in 2 years. "We had it delivered to the house this afternoon," my father added. "It's waiting for you in the driveway when we get back." Brandon jumped up and hugged them, making a huge scene. I sat, frozen, my mind racing back 6 years to my college graduation when my parents had given me a used fossil watch. "Something practical that will last," my father had called it. "This is to give you the motivation to really make your business succeed," my mother explained to Brandon. "We know having the right image will help you attract the right investors." I forced a smile and a quiet congratulations to Brandon, who barely acknowledged me already, scrolling through his phone to text friends. The rest of dinner was a blur of Brandon gushing about the Tesla, my parents indulging him, and me picking at my steak, the feeling in my gut like a physical blow. It wasn't the car itself. I'd never expected such an extravagant gift. It was the stark, undeniable reminder of how differently we were valued. After dinner, they insisted we all go back to their house so Brandon could see his new car. I followed in my Toyota, seriously debating just going home. But some masochistic part of me needed to witness the full extent of it. The Tesla sat in the driveway, gleaming under the lights. Midnight silver metallic, every upgrade imaginable. Brandon circled it like a predator, running his hands over the smooth exterior before jumping in, exploring the massive touchscreen. "This is sick. The acceleration on this thing is insane," he gushed. Ethan, get in. Let me show you what this baby can do. I politely declined, claiming an early meeting the next day. As I turned to leave, my mother pulled me aside. I know what you're thinking, she said softly. But you have to understand. Brandon needs this boost of confidence. You've always been so independent, so capable. Your brother needs more support to find his way. It was the same justification I'd heard my entire life. And for the first time, I couldn't hold back. He's 23 years old, Mom. When does the finding his way period end? And when does my independence stop being used as an excuse to give him everything and mean nothing? Her expression hardened. That's not fair, Ethan. We've always supported you. When I needed you to, I finished for her. Which, according to you, is never. I left. Before she could respond, a tightness in my chest making it hard to breathe. When I got home, I called Kayla. She came over immediately, sensing the strain in my voice. They bought him a Tesla, I told her, the words barely out. A $130,000 car to help him look the part for his latest hobby that they're funding. Kayla sat beside me, taking my hand. I'm sorry, Ethan. That's beyond ridiculous. Am I crazy for being upset? I asked. I mean, I don't even want a Tesla. I just want. I trailed off, unable to articulate it. You want them to value you as much as they value him, Kayla finished. That's not crazy. That's completely reasonable. The next morning, I woke to a barrage of texts from Brandon. All pictures of him posing with his new Tesla in various locations. The final message read, Bro, I need you to take some professional look shots of me with the car for my Instagram business promotion. Can you do it this weekend? I didn't respond. Marcus called later that day. I heard about the Tesla, he said. Brandon's posted about 50 photos already. Of course he has, I sighed. You know what the worst part is? Marcus continued. Your parents are enabling him to keep being a child. They're not doing him any favors. I knew he was right. Every time Brandon failed or lost interest, my parents swooped in with a new opportunity and more resources, never allowing him to face the consequences of his actions or develop any real resilience. Over the next week, Brandon's reckless behavior with the Tesla was painfully obvious. 2. Speeding tickets within 5 days. My mom casually mentioned it at Sunday dinner, laughing it off. As boys being boys and getting used to the power of the car, Brandon arrived 45 minutes late to that same dinner, bragging about hitting 120 miles per hour on the highway. I couldn't stay silent. That's not just illegal, it's dangerous, I pointed out. You could kill someone driving like that. Brandon rolled his eyes. Relax, bro. The car practically drives itself. Besides, there was hardly anyone on the road. My dad immediately changed the subject, effectively ending any discussion about Brandon's irresponsible driving. After dinner, as Brandon was leaving, I followed him outside. Seriously, Brandon, you need to be more careful with that car. It's not just about speed. That much power requires respect. Brandon laughed, twirling the key fob. What would you know about it? Your Toyota probably takes a full minute to hit 60. This is not a joke, I insisted. Just promise me you'll be more responsible. Whatever, man. Stop being such a buzzkill. He slid into the driver's seat and revved the electric motor, then sped off down the quiet suburban street, far too quickly. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear, a sense of dread settling over me. Little did I know, my concerns would prove prophetic in just a few days. The following Friday night, I was watching a movie with Kayla when my phone rang just after midnight. Brandon's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Ethan, I need a favor. Brandon slurred, music and voices in the background. What is it? I asked already, anticipating the answer. I'm at this party in Somerville, and I've had a few drinks. Can you come pick me up? I don't want to leave the Tesla here overnight. I looked at Kayla. She'd heard enough. She nodded, already reaching for her shoes. Text me the address, I told Brandon. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't drive anywhere. You're the best, bro, he replied, his words running together. Kayla insisted on coming. I don't trust him to be straight with you, she said as we got into my car. He might try to convince you he's fine to drive. We arrived at a large house in Somerville, music pulsing. Brandon was waiting outside, leaning against his Tesla, which was parked haphazardly at the curb. As I approached, I could see he was way more intoxicated than he'd sounded. His eyes were unfocused, and he swayed even while leaning against the car. "Finally," he exclaimed. "Let me grab my jacket and we can go." While he stumbled back inside, I examined the Tesla. Under the streetlights, I noticed a small scratch on the front bumper that hadn't been there before. Brandon returned, jacket in hand. "All right, let's roll. You drive your car, and I'll follow you home." I stared at him in disbelief. "You are not driving anywhere, Brandon. You are clearly drunk." "I'm fine," he insisted, fumbling with the key fob. "I've only had like 3 beers." The smell of alcohol coming off him told a different story. "No way. Give me your keys. I'll drive your car, and Kayla can follow in mine." Brandon's face darkened. "Stop treating me like a child. I know how to drive my own car." "Brandon, you'll get arrested for DUI, or worse, you could hurt someone," I said firmly. "Give me the keys." He tried to move past me to the driver's door. I stepped in front of him. "Move, Ethan," he demanded, his voice rising. "No, I am not letting you drive drunk." Brandon suddenly shoved me hard, sending me stumbling backward. "Who do you think you are? My babysitter? This is my car, and I'll drive it if I want to." Kayla stepped between us. "Brandon, be reasonable. Ethan is just trying to help you." A small crowd had gathered, watching with interest. Brandon, noticing the audience, seemed to get even more agitated. "Fine," he eventually spat, tossing the key fob at me with more force than necessary. "Take the damn car. I'll ride with Kayla." I caught the keys, relieved. "Good decision. Let's go." We arranged for Kayla to drive my Toyota with Brandon while I drove the Tesla. As I adjusted the seat and mirrors, a twinge of resentment hit me. Not for the car itself, but for what it represented. Another example of my brother being rewarded despite his irresponsible behavior. The drive back to my parents' house was tense. In my rearview mirror, I could see Brandon gesticulating angrily in the passenger seat of my Toyota. When we arrived, he stormed out before Kayla had fully stopped and stomped toward the house without a word. "That went well," Kayla remarked dryly. I placed the key fob on the kitchen counter inside, where Brandon would find it, and we left without further confrontation. As we drove back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that the incident wasn't over, that somehow this would come back to haunt me. My premonition proved correct. My phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. It was my father, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Ethan, get over to the corner of Broadway and Walnut Street right now. We need to talk about what you did to Brandon's car." Before I could respond, he'd hung up, confused and concerned. I quickly dressed and drove to the specified location, a quiet intersection about half a mile from the party house. As I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. The Tesla was wrapped around a tree, its front end completely crushed, airbags deployed. Broken glass scattered across the pavement. My parents stood next to it, looking grim, while Brandon sat on the curb, his head in his hands. I parked and approached slowly, still trying to process the scene. "What happened?" "I left the car at the house last night." My father turned to me, his face red with fury. "Drop the act. Ethan, Brandon told us everything." "Everything about what?" I asked, genuinely confused. My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling. "How could you do this? Taking Brandon's car in the middle of the night because you were jealous? We raised you better than this." I looked from my parents to Brandon, who was now watching me with a strange mix of defiance and satisfaction. Suddenly, I understood. "Wait, you think I crashed the car?" I asked incredulously. "Brandon heard you leave at around 3 o'clock in the morning," my father continued. "He saw you from his window, taking the keys from the counter and driving off in his Tesla. He tried calling you, but you didn't answer." I was speechless. This was so far from the truth, I could barely process it. "That is completely false. I drove the Tesla to your house last night because Brandon was too drunk to drive. I left the keys on the counter and went home with Kayla. I never came back." Brandon stood up, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Why are you lying? I saw you, Ethan. You've always been jealous of everything I get. You couldn't stand that Mom and Dad bought me this car. This is insane," I exclaimed, turning to my parents. "I was home with Kayla all night after dropping off Brandon. Check my phone's location history if you don't believe me." My mother shook her head sadly. Your phone could have been anywhere. You could have left it at home. So you believe him over me? Without any evidence. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. The evidence is right there, he said, pointing to the wrecked Tesla. And your brother has no reason to lie about this. I laughed bitterly. No reason except avoiding responsibility for his own actions, which has been his specialty his entire life. That's enough, my father snapped. The insurance won't cover this because they consider it unauthorized use. The repairs will cost at least $30,000, and you are going to pay for them. I stared at him in disbelief. I'm not paying for a car I did not crash. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Ethan, please, just take responsibility for what you did. We can work out a payment plan. It was at that moment that I realized how completely broken our family dynamic was. Not only was Brandon lying, but my parents were so invested in their perception of him as the one who needed protection that they were willing to believe the worst of me without question. Call me when you're ready to hear the truth, I said quietly, turning to leave. If you walk away from this, Ethan, my father called after me, don't bother coming to Sunday dinner or any family event until you make this right. I paused, but didn't turn around. I guess I'll see you when you come to your senses then. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with texts from my parents demanding I reconsider, followed by a detailed estimate for the Tesla repairs. By that afternoon, family friends were calling, having heard Brandon's version of events, how his jealous older brother had stolen and wrecked his new car in a fit of envy. The Walkers, longtime friends who adored Brandon, left a particularly hurtful voicemail. We always thought you were the responsible one, Ethan. We're so disappointed to hear about your behavior. Jealousy is a terrible thing. That night, alone in my apartment after Kayla had gone home, I finally broke down. Years of being the responsible one, watching Brandon get everything he wanted, had built a reservoir of pain that I had never fully acknowledged. Now, being falsely accused and ostracized by my own family, that dam burst. I sat on my kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, and cried for the first time in years. Not just for the current injustice, but for a lifetime of being valued less than my brother in the eyes of the people who should have loved us equally. For 3 days, I existed in a fog of hurt and disbelief. I went to work, came home, and ignored the constant messages from my parents, which had evolved from anger to guilt-tripping. We raised you to be responsible, Ethan. We're so disappointed. Your brother is devastated by your betrayal. This family needs to stick together, not tear each other apart. On the 4th day, my Uncle James called. Unlike the others, he started differently. Ethan, I do not believe for 1 second that you took that car, he said, without preamble. I know my nephew, and that is not who you are. His words were a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Thank you. I managed, my voice thick with emotion. No one else believes me. I've watched how they treat you compared to Brandon for years, Uncle James continued. Robert is my brother, and I love him, but he and Diana have been blind when it comes to your brother. They have created this monster by never holding him accountable. We talked for nearly an hour, Uncle James listening as I recounted the events of that night in detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking again. You need evidence, Ethan. Clear, irrefutable proof that Brandon is lying. Otherwise, this pattern will continue forever. What kind of evidence could I possibly get now? I asked. It's been days. Think like a detective, Uncle James suggested. Where was the party? Are there security cameras nearby? Witnesses who saw Brandon return to the car? Digital footprints? Your generation documents? Everything. There has to be something. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and began mapping out a plan. The party had been at a house on a fairly busy street in Somerville. Many businesses and apartment buildings in that area had security cameras. The Tesla itself had cameras that recorded constantly when in motion. Brandon had been visibly intoxicated, so others at the party must have seen his condition. I started methodically, focusing first on the location. The next day after work, I returned to the street where the party had been. I noted 3 businesses with visible security cameras, a convenience store on the corner, a small apartment building with a security system, and a restaurant across the street. I approached each one, explaining my situation honestly. The convenience store owner was sympathetic, but said his cameras only covered the storefront. The apartment manager was hesitant until I mentioned potential drunk driving, at which point she agreed to check. The restaurant manager, Lisa, proved to be the most helpful. Our cameras cover the whole street for security purposes, she explained, and we keep footage for 2 weeks. She allowed me to view the recordings. After scanning through hours of footage, I found what I was looking for. At approximately 3:15 a.m., nearly 3 hours after Kayla and I had left, the Tesla's distinctive headlights appeared on the screen. The car pulled away from the curb where I'd left it, moving erratically. Though the driver's face wasn't visible, the timestamp was clear. Would you be willing to provide me with a copy of this footage? I asked Lisa. For something this important? Absolutely, she replied, transferring the relevant section to a USB drive for me. Next, I focused on digital evidence. I checked my phone's location history, which confirmed I had been at my apartment from 12:45 a.m. until the following morning. I took screenshots of this data, including timestamps. I also realized Kayla and I had taken a selfie in my apartment after returning home that night, timestamped 12:52 a.m., with my living room clearly in the background. Then I remembered something crucial. Brandon was an obsessive social media user. I checked his Instagram and found that he had posted a story at the party timestamped 11:30 p.m., showing him with several drinks in hand. That story had expired, but a friend of mine had viewed it and taken a screenshot out of habit, finding Brandon's drunk posting amusing. More importantly, Brandon had posted another story at 2:45 a.m. after Kayla and I had dropped him off, complaining about me being a buzzkill and saying he was still ready to party. This story had also expired, but not before several people had seen it. I reached out to mutual acquaintances, carefully framing my questions. One of Brandon's friends, Alex, revealed something critical. Yeah, man, Brandon was wasted. That night, Alex told me over the phone. After you left, he kept drinking. I was surprised when he said he was heading out again around 3. I tried to stop him, told him to call an Uber, but he said something about showing you he could drive just fine. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I asked. Alex hesitated. I don't want to get in the middle of family drama. This is not drama, Alex. My parents are forcing me to pay $30,000 for something I didn't do. He sighed. I'll text you what I remember. That's the best I can do. True to his word, Alex sent a detailed text about Brandon's state that night and his declaration about driving. I saved the message as a screenshot. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While searching through my texts with Brandon, I discovered he had sent a message to me at 3:21 a.m., a message I had missed in the chaos of the following morning. It read simply, F*** you for thinking I'm too drunk to drive, showing this baby what she can do. This message had been sent 6 minutes after the security footage showed the Tesla leaving its parking spot. But the final piece of the puzzle emerged when Marcus suggested checking if Brandon had texted anyone else that night. Drunk people love to brag, he pointed out. I reached out to Tyler, Brandon's closest friend, pretending I already knew the truth and was just trying to understand why Brandon had lied. Listen, I know Brandon took the car after I dropped him off, I said when Tyler answered. I have the security footage. I just want to know why he's blaming me. Tyler, believing I knew everything, opened up immediately. He texted me right after he crashed. Man, he was freaking out about what your parents would do. I told him to call them and come clean, but he said they'd kill him if they found out he was driving drunk, so he decided to blame you instead. He said they always believe whatever he tells them about you. I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Yeah, Tyler admitted, sounding uncomfortable. I told him it was messed up, but he was panicking. Do you still have those texts? I asked. Yeah, I never delete anything. You want me to send screenshots? That would be extremely helpful, I said hardly believing my luck. Within minutes, Tyler had sent me screenshots of his conversation with Brandon from that night. The messages clearly showed Brandon admitting to the crash and deliberately planning to blame me. Over the course of a week, I had compiled an airtight case, security footage showing the Tesla leaving hours after I had gone home, location data proving I was in my apartment, social Media posts showing Brandon was still awake and drinking after I left him, witness accounts of his intoxication and intention to drive, and finally, text messages in which he admitted to the crash and his plan to frame me. I organized everything chronologically in a digital folder, making multiple backups. As I reviewed the evidence, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication that I could prove my innocence, but also profound sadness that it had come to this. My own brother had deliberately tried to destroy my relationship with our parents and force me to pay for his mistake. Kayla came over that evening to review what I had gathered. As she scrolled through the evidence, her expression grew increasingly troubled. "This is so much worse than I thought," she said quietly. "He didn't just lie in the moment. This was calculated. He saw an opportunity to avoid consequences and took it, regardless of how it would affect you. The question now is what to do with all of this," I said. "Part of me just wants to email everything to my parents and be done with it." "No," Kayla said firmly. "This needs to happen in person. They need to see your face when the truth comes out. And more importantly, they need to see Brandon's face when he's confronted with evidence he cannot deny." I knew she was right. This wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about finally addressing the dysfunctional family dynamic that had allowed this situation to develop in the first place. "I'll call them tomorrow," I decided. "Request a family meeting to discuss the situation. They'll think I'm coming to apologize and agree to pay for the repairs." "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked when I told him my plan the next day. "This is going to change your family forever." I thought about his question carefully. The family I thought I had never existed in the first place. Maybe it's time to build something real from the ashes. The following Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house at the agreed-upon time of 4 o'clock. I had dressed deliberately in a button-down shirt and slacks, professional, serious attire that matched the gravity of what I was about to do. I carried a laptop bag containing my computer and a USB drive with all the evidence, as well as printed copies as backup. My mother answered the door with a tight smile. "Ethan, we're so glad you decided to come. We've been worried about you." The living room had been arranged like a tribunal. My father sat in his leather armchair. My mother took her place on the sofa, and Brandon lounged in the window seat, a smug expression on his face. He clearly believed this meeting was about my surrender and apology. "Before we start," my father began, "we want you to know that we appreciate you coming to resolve this situation. Family needs to stick together, even through difficult times." I nodded, but remained standing. I agree that family is important. That's why I'm here. Because the truth matters, especially among family. My father frowned slightly at my tone. "Well, we know the truth, Ethan. What matters now is how we move forward. We've worked out a payment plan that should be manageable with your salary." "I am not here to discuss a payment plan," I interrupted calmly. "I am here to show you what actually happened that night." Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the first sign of nervousness I had seen from him. "We already know what happened," he said quickly. "Can we just move on?" "No, we cannot," I replied, opening my laptop on the coffee table. "What you all think happened and what actually happened are very different things." My mother sighed. "Ethan, prolonging this is not helping anyone. Please just give me 15 minutes to show you what I have found," I pressed. "After that, if you still believe I should pay for the repairs, I will leave and never bring it up again." My father hesitated, then nodded curtly. 15 minutes. I began methodically, starting with a timeline of events that night. At approximately 11:45 p.m., Brandon called me to pick him up from a party because he was too intoxicated to drive. Kayla and I arrived at approximately 12:15 a.m. Brandon was visibly drunk, as these photos from his own Instagram show. I displayed the screenshots of Brandon's social media posts from the party, including the ones showing him with multiple drinks. After an argument in which Brandon initially insisted he could drive, I took his keys and drove the Tesla back here, while Kayla drove Brandon in my car. We arrived at approximately 12:35 a.m., at which point I placed the keys on the kitchen counter and left with Kayla. We returned to my apartment at 12:45 a.m. I showed them the selfie Kayla and I had taken in my apartment, with its timestamp, followed by screenshots of my phone's location data, showing I remained at my address until the following morning. Brandon was now sitting upright, his casual demeanor replaced by tense alertness. That doesn't prove anything. You could have come back later. That brings me to the next piece of evidence. I continued, unfazed. Security footage from the restaurant across from the party house. I played the video, showing the Tesla pulling away at 3:15 a.m., its movements erratic and unsteady. My father leaned forward, frowning. This could be anyone driving. We cannot see who is behind the wheel. True, I acknowledged. But consider this. I displayed the screenshot of Brandon's text to me at 3:21 a.m. F*** you for thinking I'm too drunk to drive. Showing this. Baby what she can do. My mother gasped softly. Brandon jumped to his feet. He could have fabricated that text, he protested, his voice rising. Phone records can verify its authenticity, I replied calmly. But if you need more evidence, I have statements from people who were at the party. I read Alex's account of Brandon continuing to drink after Kayla and I left, and his declaration about going to drive despite being intoxicated. Brandon's face had lost its color. These are just my friends covering for you. Why would your friends cover for me, Brandon? I asked quietly. They barely know me. Then I played my trump card. But perhaps the most convincing evidence comes from your best friend, Tyler. I displayed the screenshots of Brandon's text conversation with Tyler immediately. After the crash, where he explicitly admitted to driving drunk, crashing the car, and planning to blame me because mom and dad always believe whatever I tell them about Ethan. The room fell into stunned silence. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. My father stared at the screen, the color draining from his face. Brandon exploded. You had no right to go through my private conversations. This is an invasion of privacy. I didn't go through anything, I replied. Tyler sent these to me willingly when he realized what you were doing. My father finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Brandon, is this true? Did you lie about Ethan taking the car? Brandon looked from our father to me, then to our mother, searching for an ally and finding none. His defense crumbled visibly. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, he shouted. The business, the expectations. It was one mistake. Ethan has always been the perfect son, never making any mistakes, making me look bad by comparison. For once, I thought he could take the fall. Take the fall, my father repeated incredulously. For drunk driving. For destroying a $130,000 car. For lying to our faces. My mother was openly crying now. How could you do this, Brandon? How could you try to blame your brother? Brandon's strategy shifted instantly from denial to victimhood. I was scared. I panicked. I knew you'd be so disappointed in me. So, instead, you tried to destroy your brother's relationship with us, my father said, his voice hardening. You tried to force him to pay $30,000 for your mistake. I stood silently, watching as the family dynamic I had known my entire life began to unravel. Before my eyes, part of me had expected to feel satisfaction, but instead, I felt a profound sadness for all of us, for the lies we had lived with, for the preferential treatment that had shaped both Brandon and me in such harmful ways. Brandon turned on me suddenly, his face contorted with rage. You just couldn't let it go, could you? You had to be right as always. The perfect Ethan, never doing anything wrong. This is not about being perfect, I replied evenly. This is about basic honesty and taking responsibility for your actions. That's rich coming from you. Brandon sneered. You've always been jealous of me, of everything mom and dad have given me. Brandon, stop, my father commanded. You're only making this worse. Why should I stop? Brandon shouted. For 23 years, you've told me I'm special, that I deserve the best of everything. And now, suddenly, I'm the villain because of one mistake. This is not about one mistake, I finally said, my voice rising for the first time. This is about a lifetime of you never facing consequences for anything. It's about our parents giving you everything while telling me I needed to earn it all myself. It's about you being so confident that mom and dad would believe any lie you told about me that you didn't hesitate to try to ruin my life to save yourself from taking responsibility. The raw truth of my words hung in the air. My mother sobbed quietly while my father stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. Brandon looked around the room, seemingly realizing for the first time that he had lost his audience. With a final glare at me, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that the family photos on the wall rattled. In the silence that followed, I began packing up my laptop. My father finally spoke. "Ethan, I do not know what to say." "You don't need to say anything right now," I replied, closing my laptop bag. "I think we all need time to process this." "How can you be so calm?" my mother asked, through her tears. "After what we accused you of." I looked at her thoughtfully. "Because for the first time in my life, I know exactly where I stand. And it is not where I thought I was standing all these years." As I moved toward the door, my father stood. "Son, please don't leave like this. We need to talk about what happened." "We will," I assured him, "but not today. I have said what I needed to say, and I have shown you the truth. What happens next is up to you both." I left them sitting in their perfect living room, surrounded by the debris of the family narrative they had constructed over decades. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with texts from my parents, asking me to come back, saying we needed to talk this through as a family. I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I was setting the terms of my relationship with my family, and I needed space to determine what those terms would be. For 2 weeks, I maintained my distance. I declined calls from my parents, responded to their increasingly desperate texts with brief assurances that I was fine but needed time, and ignored Brandon's messages entirely. This period of silence wasn't about punishment, it was about giving myself the space to process a lifetime of family dynamics that had been exposed in a single afternoon. During this time, I learned from Uncle James that Brandon had launched a preemptive campaign to discredit me to the extended family, claiming I had manipulated evidence to make him look bad out of jealousy. Most relatives, accustomed to my parents' narrative, initially believed him. But the tide began to turn at a family birthday celebration that I didn't attend. According to Uncle James, who called me the next day, Brandon had been unusually subdued until someone mentioned the Tesla incident. "That's when your brother made the mistake of trying to paint you as the villain again," Uncle James recounted. I had enough at that point. I stood up and told everyone that I had seen the evidence myself, that you had irrefutable proof of what really happened. How did they react? I asked, genuinely curious. Your cousin Emma asked why Brandon would lie about something so serious. Your Aunt Patricia wanted to know why your parents had been so quick to believe him over you. It was like watching dominoes fall. Brandon had apparently stormed out of that gathering, too, while my parents sat in uncomfortable silence as their parenting choices were openly questioned by family members for the first time. The first direct contact came from my mother, a text that read, "Ethan, I know you need space, and I respect that. I just want you to know that I am so sorry. What we did was unforgivable. When you are ready, I would like to talk." It was the first time I could remember my mother acknowledging she had made a mistake regarding Brandon, let alone apologizing for it. I didn't respond immediately, still sorting through my feelings. 3 days later, my father sent an email, formal and businesslike, as was his way. "Ethan, I hope this message finds you well. After considerable reflection on the events of the past month, I feel it is necessary to address the serious errors in judgment that occurred. The fact that your mother and I were so quick to believe Brandon's account without giving you the benefit of the doubt represents a failure on our part as parents. We have initiated discussions with Brandon about his actions and the consequences thereof. When you feel ready to re-engage, I believe it would be productive for us to discuss how to move forward as a family. While I understand that trust has been severely damaged, I hope we can begin the process of repair. Regards, Dad." The email was stiff and formal, but coming from my father, it represented a significant admission of wrongdoing. Still, I noted that he framed the issue as a single incident rather than acknowledging the years of preferential treatment that had enabled Brandon's behavior in the first place. Brandon's message came a few days later, a text that read simply, "I messed up. Sorry." The brevity and lack of specificity made it clear this was a perfunctory apology, likely prompted by our parents, rather than stemming from genuine remorse. During these weeks of separation, I focused on the relationships that had sustained me. Kayla, and I grew closer as she supported me through the emotional aftermath. Marcus checked in daily, providing both distraction and perspective. I also engaged in more self-care than ever before, reading books on family dynamics, meditating, and even speaking with a therapist to help make sense of my family history and my path forward. Exactly 17 days after the confrontation, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, I found my father standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "May I come in?" he asked, his usual commanding presence diminished somehow. I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat in my small living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "I didn't call ahead because I was afraid you would say no," he finally admitted. "I might have," I acknowledged. My father looked around my modest apartment with new eyes, as if seeing it, and by extension my life, clearly for the first time. "You have built a good life for yourself," he said, quietly, "without much help from us." "I did what you told me to do," I replied. "I earned everything myself." He winced slightly at having his words reflected back. "I thought I was teaching you self-reliance. I thought it was the right thing to do." "With Brandon," he trailed off. "With Brandon, you thought the right thing was to give him everything without requiring any effort or responsibility." I finished for him. My father nodded slowly. "We thought he needed more support, more confidence. We were trying to help him find his way. And instead you created a person who believes he is entitled to everything and responsible for nothing." The blunt assessment hung in the air. My father didn't argue. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said after a long pause. "About the way we raised you both, about the different standards we set. We didn't see it clearly until now." It was the closest my father had ever come to admitting a fundamental flaw in his parenting. I remained silent, waiting. "Brandon moved out yesterday," he said. "We told him he needed to find his own place, get a real job, and start paying his own bills. He didn't take it well." I could imagine the scene. Brandon, who had never faced real consequences, suddenly confronted with basic adult expectations. "That must have been difficult," I said, not without sympathy. "Years of enabling would make this transition painful." "It was necessary," my father replied firmly. "Long overdue." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we had never explored before. For the first time, my father listened more than he spoke, asking about my experiences growing up, my perspective on family events I had previously kept to myself. Though he occasionally became defensive, he made a visible effort to hear me out. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Your mother would very much like to see you when you are ready." 3 days later, I agreed to meet my mother for coffee at a neutral location. She was already waiting when I arrived, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I was accustomed to. Seeing her, unlike my father's somewhat clinical approach, my mother's emotions were raw and immediate. "I cannot stop thinking about how we failed you," she said, tears forming almost immediately. "How I failed you. I always told myself I was being fair, that you were stronger, and didn't need the same support Brandon did. But that wasn't fair at all, was it?" Her acknowledgement was more direct than my father's, and it caught me off guard. "No," I replied. "Honestly, it was not. I convinced myself that loving my children equally meant giving them different things based on what I thought they needed," she continued. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing what you actually needed: acknowledgement, support, belief, and only saw what I wanted to see." We talked about specific moments throughout my childhood when I had felt overlooked or undervalued. Unlike previous conversations where she had dismissed my feelings or justified the disparate treatment, this time she listened with genuine remorse. "I cannot change the past," she said finally, "but I want to do better moving forward, if you will let me." The conversation was painful but cleansing in a way I had not anticipated. As we parted, my mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "I am so proud of the man you have become, Ethan, despite us. Not because of us." A week later, I received an email from both my parents suggesting family therapy to address the patterns that have damaged our relationships with both our sons. It was a step in the right direction, though I noted the subtle framing that positioned the problem as affecting both Brandon and me equally, rather than acknowledging that Brandon had been harmed by overindulgence. while I had been harmed by emotional neglect. Still, it was progress. I agreed to attend an initial session, with the caveat that I would decide whether to continue after that. During this period, Brandon's behavior followed a predictable pattern. After moving into an apartment that our parents were still partially subsidizing, he continued to struggle with basic adult responsibilities. He was hired at an entry-level marketing position that a friend of my father had arranged, only to be fired 3 weeks later for repeatedly arriving late and unprepared. Rather than learning from this, Brandon blamed his boss and complained to our parents about the impossible expectations of the working world. For the first time, however, they did not immediately rescue him. My father offered to help him update his resume, but made it clear that finding the next job was Brandon's responsibility. This new approach led to increased tension between Brandon and our parents. Uncle James reported that Sunday dinners had become strained affairs, with Brandon alternating between sullen silence and outbursts about how unfairly he was being treated. The irony that this was exactly how I had been treated my entire life seemed lost on him. As I observed these changes from a distance, I experienced a complex mix of emotions. There was validation in seeing my parents finally recognize the harmful patterns, but also sadness for the years lost to those patterns. There was sympathy for Brandon, who was ill-equipped for the real world due to our parents' enabling, but also lingering anger at his willingness to sacrifice me to protect himself. Kayla helped me navigate these conflicting feelings. You can acknowledge the progress without pretending everything is fixed, she pointed out. And you can feel sorry for Brandon while still holding him accountable for his choices. I keep wondering if I should have done this years ago, I admitted to her. Stood up for myself, forced them to see what was happening. Maybe, she acknowledged. But you weren't ready then, and they might not have been ready to hear it. Sometimes things happen when they need to happen. Her perspective helped me focus on the path forward rather than regretting the past. I began to see that while I couldn't change my family's history, I could influence its future by maintaining clear boundaries and honest communication. When I spoke with Marcus about whether to forgive my family, particularly Brandon, he offered characteristically straightforward advice. Forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about deciding not to let their actions define your life moving forward. You can forgive without forgetting or trusting them immediately. It was this conversation that helped me formulate my approach to family healing, not rushing to declare all wounds healed, but being open to gradual, demonstrated change while protecting my own emotional well-being. 6 months after the confrontation that had shattered our family's carefully constructed narrative, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The dynamics in the room were markedly different from any holiday gathering I could remember. Brandon sat quietly at one end of the table, his usual domination of the conversation noticeably absent. He had finally secured a job at a retail store, not the glamorous career he had envisioned, but honest work that he had obtained without our parents' intervention. Though he still struggled with showing up consistently, he had managed to keep this position for nearly 2 months, a small but significant sign of growth. My parents had undergone the most visible transformation. The family therapy sessions, which I had ultimately agreed to continue, had created a space for honest communication that had been lacking for decades. My father, always stoic and certain, had begun to acknowledge his role in creating the unhealthy family dynamic. My mother, who had spent years rationalizing the disparate treatment of her sons, was learning to recognize and check her impulse to shield Brandon from consequences. The most profound change, however, was in how they related to me. For the first time in my adult life, my parents asked genuine questions about my work, my goals, and my perspective. They listened when I spoke, without immediately shifting attention to Brandon. When I mentioned a promotion I had received, they celebrated it without qualification. "We'd like to take you and Kayla out to dinner to celebrate," my father offered. "Somewhere nice, your choice." In the past, such an offer would have been extended only to Brandon, with my achievements deemed expected and therefore unremarkable. The change was subtle, but significant. Brandon, for his part, still harbored resentment toward me for ending what he saw as his entitled way of life. He was cordial but distant, occasionally making passive-aggressive comments that revealed his lingering bitterness. "Must be nice to be the golden child now," he muttered. During dessert, after our mother had asked about my plans to possibly buy a condo. In the past, such a comment would have been ignored or even validated by our parents. This time, my father fixed Brandon with a stern look. "That's enough, Brandon. Your brother's success is not a slight against you." Brandon fell silent and used to being held accountable for his words. I felt no satisfaction in his discomfort, only hoped that this new accountability might eventually help him grow into a more responsible adult. After dinner, Uncle James pulled me aside. "I have never been prouder of you than I am right now," he said quietly. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for how you have handled the aftermath with dignity." His words meant more than he could know. Throughout the painful process of family reconstruction, I had strived to remain measured and fair, to advocate for my needs, without seeking revenge or wallowing in past hurts. The healing was far from complete. There were still moments when old patterns emerged, my mother occasionally slipping into making excuses for Brandon's behavior, my father sometimes dismissing emotions as irrelevant. But these instances were now recognized and addressed, either in the moment or in our ongoing therapy sessions. As for my own life, the shift in family dynamics had coincided with positive changes in other areas. The confidence I had gained from finally standing up for myself had spilled over into my professional life, leading to more assertive contributions at work and that subsequent promotion. Kayla and I had decided to move in together, a step toward the future we were building. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own perception of reality, even when others questioned it. The gaslighting I had experienced throughout my life, being told that the preferential treatment I observed was not happening or was justified, had created a habit of doubting my own experiences. Breaking free from that doubt had been liberating. One evening in late December, as Kayla and I decorated our new shared apartment for the holidays, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. I never expected that exposing the truth about the Tesla would change everything so fundamentally, I told her as we hung lights. "It was never really about the car," she pointed out. "The car was just the catalyst that finally made the underlying issues impossible to ignore." She was right, of course. The Tesla incident had merely been the breaking point in a lifetime of imbalance. The crash had damaged more than just an expensive vehicle. It had cracked the foundation of lies our family had been built upon. And paradoxically, that destruction had created the opportunity for something healthier to emerge. Brandon and I would likely never have the close brotherly relationship that might have developed under different circumstances. Too much water had passed under that bridge. But we were learning to interact with a new honesty, without the artificial hierarchy that had previously defined our relationship. My parents were working to repair the damage their unequal treatment had caused, though I recognized that old habits died hard. Their progress was inconsistent, but genuine, and I had made peace with the fact that perfect fairness was an unrealistic expectation. What mattered was their willingness to acknowledge the past and commit to doing better. As for me, I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, the courage to stand firm in my truth, even when those I loved tried to deny it. That knowledge could never be taken from me, regardless of what happened with my family in the future. The lesson I carried forward was both simple and profound. Self-respect must come before family peace. Real love includes accountability. Standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. And sometimes, the hardest step to take is standing up to those you love, even when you know it will cause pain. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it is buried or how convincing the alternative narrative might be. In exposing that truth, I had not only cleared my name, but had also unexpectedly created the possibility of healing for everyone involved. The journey continues, with progress measured not in grand gestures, but in small moments of honesty, accountability, and genuine connection. It is a path we are all still learning to walk, sometimes stumbling, sometimes striding forward with confidence, but always moving towards something more authentic than what came before. Have you ever had to stand up to your family to protect yourself? How did you handle that difficult situation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is not just okay, it is necessary. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most difficult steps we take lead us exactly where we need to be.